I'm truly delighted to be joined by an expert panel of speakers who also happen to be my dear friends to articulate a compelling vision for Doha 2050. The speakers represent a unique collaboration of a US university, Harvard, with a UK university, Liverpool, with the Urban Economy Forum based in Canada. They bring a track record of working in the Gulf region on far-sighted and prestigious projects that serve to distinguish the region as a cosmopolitan place with 7,000 years of sustainable civilization and world-leading innovations, informed by the best in class also of international research excellence. Each of our experts will introduce themselves the first time they speak. So let me frame our session a little. Our purpose today is to demonstrate how an international collaborative partnership can foster large-scale sustainable urban and national transformations in the Gulf region, I would hope beginning from today and go all the way on to 2050. First part of our session will introduce the concept and our background of success and working together in the Gulf, and it will serve to frame the problem. For part two, we will take you through 6 breakthrough innovations related to the advancing sustainable urbanism that we could bring together in a unique fusion to create a world-leading solution for the Gulf, bringing to life the Doha Vision 2050 as our case study. This bespoke solution would advance global thinking and showcase Doha as a thought leader in this space, a pioneer city. We will then conclude our session with the key regional experts reflecting on the visions that have been presented and bringing their own creativity to help shape the future further by commenting on the Doha Vision 2050 presented. I think we will all appreciate that delivering against sustainable urbanism under the circumstances that face us today will rely upon collaboration. I should say radical collaboration, because that's what's needed to reflect the scale and impact as we need to see to create local and scalable solutions for the world. And it's here that we see how this unique collaboration and visioning session can connect stakeholders around a shared purpose, that of advancing holistic, sustainable urbanism in the Gulf Doha case study as a window to the world of the art of the possible. So let's get started with part one. All right. I am Nader Ardalan. I'm president of Ardalan Associates, and I had the pleasure of being co-editor with Professor Spiro Polalis of Harvard when I was senior research associate there to do the Harvard Gulf Sustainable Urbanism book that we commenced in 2011 with Meshareb and Qatar Foundation. So here, this collaborative group that has come together. At the center is what we call an urban collaborative. Harvard Graduate School of Design and School of Public Health, Liverpool, RSHAM, and Urban Economy Forum and the UN Pavilion and Ardalan Associates. And these are the relationships. Although we are the urban collaborative core, we work with everyone in this team in a forward-backward manner with other Qatar groups on the right, with Meshareb, with Qatar University, with our friends at AEB, with Qatar Planning Department, and with the Habitat Group. First slide for you as a background into part one. Why are we here? Because we were commissioned in 2011 by Meshareb to do the Gulf Sustainable Urbanism, a digital book that I'll allude to shortly, with Spiro And this wonderful team, these smiling faces represent nearly representatives of 200 faculty of universities, of institutions, of private business entities who all worked with us to put phase one together. The research scope, the methodology, and the acknowledgements I'll go through with you in the next slide. Gulf sustainable urbanism related to 8 countries around the Gulf: Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Iran, and Iraq. It was organized on 3 topics, research topics: environment and public health, urban form and architecture, socio-cultural and economics. This was how we did year 1, the past. And you now see an image on the left of the book, actually volume 1,000 analytical diagrams, drawings, and photographs. This digital book is available online for you to review. On the right, you see images of the day Masharib held an international webinar to launch the book. And on the top, you see 2 gentlemen, one of whom is on speaking with us today, who were instrumental in how we carried out the first book. That person on the right is Isa al-Mohanadi, and on the left is His Excellency Sheikh Hassan. Sumya, will you tell us something about what you did with Liverpool and Qatar National Library?
Sure, Nader. Thank you very much. And thank you for this great opportunity for being present at this fantastic forum. Now, Archiam Research Center, based at Liverpool University, has collaborated with the Qatar National Library on this very ambitious project, which we call the Gulf Architecture Project, or GAP for short. And we have recently completed the phase 1 of that work. The idea was to create the world's largest digital archive on Gulf architecture and urbanism. So in a way, what Nader was describing about the kind of the 3 key aspects of Nader's work and Harvard work, we were mainly focusing on the architecture and urban aspect, but also drawing in information to support that from the public health, but also essentially the ethnographic side of the historical analysis. So with this, we were also supporting that work with highly researched metadata. So this cross-disciplinary knowledge, as I was alluding to before, would aid researchers, we hope, and practitioners in the Gulf region. Now, Nader, if you can go back to the previous slide, please. Yeah, thank you. We have undertaken about 9,000 items of work, which has been archived and metadata technically, as well as in research metadata entry. And we have introduced a diverse range of typological, morphological, and ethnographic analysis. Some of the examples that you can see on the right-hand side, which are to do with also a number of range of ways in which we have detailedly documented settlements, and then they have been analyzed in terms of typological material as well as their historical context. Next slide, please. Archiam has not only done this really important piece of work for the Gulf region, but also what Archiam has been involved with and Liverpool University over the last about 10 years or so is to produce heritage management plans for a range of historic sites across the Gulf region. That includes Oman, UAE, and Qatar. And these HMPs, some of these have been implemented, which has meant that we have had the opportunity to develop design proposals and urban propositions, which have been materialized, as you can see on the right-hand side, which integrates historic sites into the country's economic life and future development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I now move on to Urban Economy Forum. Reza, please tell us something about what you guys are doing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nader. Thank you, ISOCARP, for this opportunity. Urban Economy Forum is an international organization based in Toronto, Canada, that engage with the United Nations system and city leaders to build capacity and global network to realize the SDG by leading global dialogue on sustainable urban resources. Recently, we established World Urban Pavilion in collaboration between Government of Canada, United Nations, and CMHC as a global hub to exchange urban knowledge and innovation. We focus on New Urban Agenda and SDG 11 as UN Habitat lead SDG 11 as a urban agency of United Nations, and align city mandates and priorities with New Urban Agenda and establish program for SDG 11. In parallel, our annual forum is trying to create a global network, create an interactive and practical global network with countries and cities to identify, test, and exchange best practices. Next one, please. This calendar show us the history of the Urban Economy Forum. It comes from General Assembly of United Nations when countries, member states approve 17 goals as a main agenda for 2030, and then we organize kind of conference between countries regarding municipal finance and urban economy, because we believe we should focus about urban resources, sustainable urban resources, when we are talking about the sustainability, specifically creating kind of dialogue and sharing knowledge. We support and host World Cities Report 2016 as an annual report, biannual report of United Nations regarding cities. And also we had some interaction with different countries during the Habitat 3 in Quito. New Urban Agenda is one of the main agenda. Also, we try to create a guideline in collaboration with Oxford University and University College of London as a kind of agenda and guideline for finance for city leaders. And then first Urban Economy Forum hosted by UCL Geneva in Istanbul steering committee, and then we organized annual forum. And recently, during the last months, we had third Urban Economy Forum, and during the forum we had more than 300 speakers, ministers, mayors around the world, and we are trying to introduce Toronto as a kind of global hub for urban economy and sustainable urban resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Reza. I just want to say that you've just got a glimpse of the powerful groups that we have brought for you today. And so we're going to go now to 6 breakthrough innovations that we'd like to present for your considerations. Some of these, and the first one that I'm going to review for you, is you have to tackle a key critical question. That question for us was, how can we make the Gulf region sustainable? And for your consideration and this development of these presentations, we have hit on the idea of Doha Vision 2050 as a case study. If we could take one city in the Gulf region, and we're planning to look at 10 cities in the Gulf region, perhaps over a year's time, we can find out best methodologies of how to deal with this question, and then look through feedback and see if this is possible, that it can also be applied to the other cities in the region. And if it is, then is it possible that this is a paradigm that might be useful for other cities? So Doha Vision 2050 as a methodology looked at different methodologies of how to look forward to 2050. We know that it's impossible to forecast the future, too dynamic, too many things changing, impossible. So we looked and found one of the methodologies very much being used in Netherlands and others as very innovative, and we've adapted that to our project. And that is the idea of backcasting. Well, what is backcasting? In general, you develop visions, alternatives of deepest wishes of people about the future. 30 years from now, environmentally, social, culturally, economically, architecturally, urbanistically, what do you think you would like as a city and an architecture and a society to live in? When we have these sort of visions, we'll then work backwards to test how possible is it? What are the limitations to these visions? One of the ways we ground our work is to look at information of the past. Since the Harvard project that I have reviewed earlier began in 2011 and was published in 2018, it has key sustainable findings of 10 cities in the Gulf region. So for our work and for Doha as a case study, we go back to the Harvard work and to the work that Liverpool has done. And that gives us the key findings of the past of how sustainability was gained. Of course, everything has changed, but that's a very good marker. We want to develop Gulf Encyclopedia for Sustainable Urbanism. That means we have to come and see snapshots of today, surveys of what are the trends today. We want to do ethnographic surveys of what are people's deepest cultural, psychological, social wishes and patterns. And then we want to establish goals, and we want to develop a transition analytics to the future. And in the end, the idea is to come up with alternative future city visions 2050. Backcasting will be based on the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals that Reza reviewed. It will also be based on Qatar's National Vision 2030, dealing with human development, social development, economic development, and environmental development. And particularly, we will look at number 11 of the SDG goals, which is sustainable cities and communities. And we've worked very closely with UN Habitat that is responsible at the UN for this subject. And UAE Forum and Urban Economy Forum is really based on sustainability goals number 11. The backcasting research framework is that we will continue with the social, cultural, economic, governmental, environmental, public health, and urban form and architecture, which was the topics of our work in the phase 1, so that we have continuity of the research topic and I would say modified by including governance, which was not necessarily a high point in the phase 1. And we will look at 4 scales that go from region to city to neighborhood to unit. And we will then be able to also archive this work in a data center based in Doha. So backcasting envisioning scenario process begins with phase 1, looking at sustainability findings, looking as a focus on Doha, snapshot year and surveys, ethnographic surveys, future goals, and then an analytical based study, principally based at Harvard, that will go through these wishes and how AI analytics can help us determine what are the most feasible and wind up with a series of options for the future. So stage A, Doha 2050, we can do in 1 year. Stage B, which is to apply it to the other 7 cities in 2 years, overall a 3-year research proposal. Jack, would you be kind enough to take over and tell us about breakthrough innovation number 2?
Gladly, Nadir, and greetings all. You know, as we sit here today, we have to realize that next week, world leaders are meeting in Glasgow, the Conference of the Parties, COPs 26, to once again try to get the countries of this world to commit to reducing greenhouse gases, which, by the way, this year reported to be an all-time high. And just a few months prior to Glasgow, the UN released this report. It's a 6th assessment of the International Panel on Climate Change. And this is a frightening report. I think it's sobering. We all should take note of this. The one graph from this report really tells us what is happening and what will continue to happen. If you look at a series of curves, the blue shaded lines are based on extrapolation of measurements and modeling. That's what the Earth temperature, our atmospheric temperature, would have been like if we hadn't dumped in excess the amount of greenhouse gases. That's in the rising curves that you see going up on the right side of that graph. Already 1.5 degrees centigrade warmer than pre-industrial times. So this is serious, and it's unequivocal that we humans, in our use of energy and the way we do agriculture, our mobility patterns are contributing to this. Next slide, please, Nader. So I think one of the fundamental questions is, can we live in hot cities? And, you know, so I think we've experienced this when we were doing work with Spiro and our team, and Nader and our team, and Isa in Doha and throughout the Middle East. One of the projects one of the days that we were on site, we were meeting at the Tornado Building. Those that know Doha can recognize that building on the right, upper right panel, that interesting convex shaped structure. But we were staying at the W Hotel. It was only like 8 blocks across Doha. And I decided, instead of taking the van over to our meetings, that I would set off early. It was still about 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock, and walk across Doha. And this diagram in the lower left hand was the mathematical expressions of what I was feeling, my body, as I was feeling walking across this parcel of urban scape. I was getting warmed by the sun on the east. I was getting warmed by the sun reflected off the windows of buildings to the west. I was being warmed by the dumping of air conditioning heat into this urban environment. So our urban scapes are already being transformed in a way because we have chosen to modernize our structures, as you have seen in this. And this is happening throughout the world. It's not just the Middle East. So next slide. So the question is, what do we do about this? If it's already hot and too hot on many occasions, what can we look forward to doing to transform our cities? Well, fortunately, next slide, Nader. Fortunately, there are ways forward, ways that are informed by the past, how we designed buildings and operated buildings in the past, and ways forward when we think of new technologies. And I think we have to go down both pathways. So the figure I show on the left here is taken from a project that we're working on. You went back to the first slide here by mistake. Well, the project is taking a city of Baltimore in the United States and attempting to cool that city by changing the surface features of that city. And that's going to require new coatings. In fact, there's a new white paint that has just been revealed that reflects 98% of the incident energy. Yeah, one more slide and we're there. Yes. So smart materials is a way forward. And that can actually been demonstrated to lower a city's temperature to almost 5 degrees. This is profound, that we can change the design of our buildings. But our cities are not just a collection of buildings. And if we want to look forward to urban living, we ought to take stock of our natural capital and our social and our human capital. And we have to think about how do we integrate greenness, nature into our urban areas. And we know from scientific literature that there are many co-benefits, not just from cooling our cities, but what it does for sociability, generosity, cognitive function, self-esteem. And we ought to look at the principles that are emerging from the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard. And this is another way of measuring how well human beings do, how well society is doing, by measuring our happiness and life satisfaction, our mental and physical health, the meaning and purpose that we find in our lives, character and virtue. What's the value of the social networks that we belong to? And of course, financial and material stability. All of these domains really go to make up the flourishing of a capacity of a country, its citizens, and even of families and of corporations. So there's emerging new insights into determining what direction we need to go in the future.
Thank you so much, Jack. You are touching on the fact that really our core focus should be people and their comfort.
Exactly.
And their ability to live well into the future. And so this attention, we're not only just looking at smart cities, we're looking at human being wellness in these cities of the future.
Exactly.
So we'd like to now move to the next one, which is the third of the breakthrough sustainable innovations. And I'd like to have our dear colleague, Professor Spiro Polalis, give us his introduction to sustainable infrastructure and planning. Spiro?
Thank you, Nader, and thank you, Jack. With Nader and Jack, we have worked together in the previous project, and I'm going to concentrate on what both Jack and Nader have said very explicitly. What can make Doha sustainable in the future? What Nader says, the Doha 2050 case study. If we go to the next slide, we learn from the past. And one of the objectives of our already completed research was to get insight on how people were adapting and how they survived with minimal means. If we go to the next one. So the question is, how can we project this to the future? And I have also observed, together with Jack, similar conditions when I was in Doha. I needed to take a taxi to go 100 meters away, and we're running about 2 kilometers. So what we need to do is we need to have a framework on how to look for the future. And at Harvard, I direct a program for the last 15 years that provides a framework for developing sustainable cities. Sustainable cities that are subject to local conditions, and at the same time, they make the cities competitive and networked. If we go to the next slide. So we focus on 5 categories. Number 1, the quality of life of people who live in the city, but beyond the city. Number 2, the leadership that drives the city to be sustainable, not only in the planning of the city, but also in operating the city. Number 3, how effectively we use resources, which is materials, water, energy, And this is important for the specific city, but it is important for the world as well, as we heard from Jack. How the city is going to coexist in nature. And number 5, how it affects the climate, how our actions affect the climate, and how we make our city resilient. If we go to the next slide, these things can be faced by looking in an integrated way, 3 elements of a city. The first one, the urban planning. The second, the planning of the infrastructure. And the third one, the buildings. If we go to the next one. So basically, we would like to have a city, not only Doha, but any city, that does not depend on cars, does not produce emissions, but rather we have an urban compactness through mixed use and reduction of the space that we need to live. If we go to the next slide. So we need to focus on how we can have people walk 5 minutes for their immediate needs, walk up to 10 minutes to satisfy almost all the needs they have, and at the same time, plan our cities so the proximities reduce the need for transportation. Our planning produces less trips, and as a result, we need less modes of transportation, we need less nodes, and we need a smaller network that takes about 30% of the area of a city as it is today. If we go to the next one. At the same time, we need a circular city. We need a circular city that definitely imports energy, imports water, imports food, but through recycling and reusing, it does not put much as waste beyond the boundaries of the city and tries to survive and live with few resources, very much like it was happening in the old days. If we go to the next slide. So I would say the problem is that technological advances and prosperity have freed architecture, and now we can do whatever we want to do. The point is that we should not do whatever we want to do and know that we have to do the right thing. If we go to the next slide, and the way to do that is to look in the past, again, not to replicate the past, this is not possible, but rather learn on how those people lived, what was their daily life, look at vernacular architecture and be able to project and adapt. And the big difference today is that we have many more people, and at the same time they request more amenities, but it is all possible to be done with proper planning, proper infrastructure planning, and proper design of buildings. So basically I focused here on the physical environment, which goes hand in hand with what Jack mentioned about people and the environment, and also what Nader focused before. And Nader, I hope we can proceed with Doha 2050 case study, so we can have the opportunity to apply all the beautiful things that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Spiro. I'd like to now move on to Professor Gareth Doherty at the Graduate School of Design, who will review for us the 4th ecological urbanism innovations breakthrough thinking that we have for you today. Gareth, will you take over?
Thank you, Nader. My name is Gareth, and I teach at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, Department of Landscape Architecture, where I also lead the Critical Landscapes Design Lab. The lab was established a couple of years ago to focus on important issues or important landscapes in a critical way. By taking a critical approach, we refer to viewing the world through the eyes of the people we are designing for. To this end, the lab takes a people-centric approach to design, rooted in human ecology that relies on spending a sustained period of engagement in the field, understanding particular sites and how people live their lives on an everyday basis. The lab has a focus on the post-colonial and Islamic societies and of the agency of landscape architecture to help imagine better futures. So we base the work of the lab on two questions. The first is, how can the practice of landscape architecture be expanded and diversified through working in societies where there is no formal landscape architecture profession, which is actually most of the world? And second, how can landscape architects more sensitively work outside of their own social context with respect and deference for others' values and ways of life? We're landscape architects, and people often say, well, that's all very well, but what have gardens got to do with urban design and sustainable cities? And I reply that while landscape architects can work on gardens, more usually we work with the elements of the garden, with soil, with plants, environmental processes, colors, smells, textures, volumes, and importantly, time, because landscape takes time. Next slide, please, Nader. The lab is currently engaged in projects in different parts of the world, ranging from Ireland to Kuwait, Nigeria, and Brazil. Next slide, please, Nader. The theoretical base of the lab is based on two publications. The first is Ecological Urbanism, which I co-edited with Mohsen Mostafavi, the former dean of Harvard Graduate School of Design. This book is inspired by Félix Guattari, the French social scientist and philosopher who wrote a book called The Three Ecologies. Guattari points out that we normally consider the environment separately from society and from aesthetics. He argues that when we're imagining sustainable cities of the future, that we must consider environment, people, and aesthetics all together. This raises the question about how do we understand our landscapes better so we can design better for them. And my book on the right, Paradoxes of Green, Landscapes of the City-State, is based on an ethnographic account of a year I spent living in Bahrain, walking through its landscape, talking to people, and interpreting the values attached to greenery. Walking is a great way to experience landscape and to meet people. By walking through Bahrain and talking with a lot of people, I discovered that so much water is used to create greenery in Bahrain, which is not good from an environmental point of view. Now, green has many values, and it's important to understand what those values are, but also what the costs are as well. Landscape architects and urban designers rarely discuss color for some reason, and this was one of the main conclusions from my research, the importance of green in the built environment. But what else did it teach me? Could I have the next slide, please? And the next one, actually. Most of my walks were done at night. This is when I could walk more comfortably. And we've heard other speakers talk about walking, and this is when I could walk more comfortably. And also, as you know, when public space comes alive. At nighttime, colors change. What seems green during the day, at nighttime can look brown or even orange, depending on the light conditions. Perceptions of space and distance change too. We're currently involved in studying and designing for nocturnal landscapes in Kuwait. Kuwait, as much of the Gulf, has nocturnal landscapes. And many of my Kuwaiti friends avoid the day and inhabit the nighttime. Dinner becomes breakfast and breakfast becomes dinner. We wonder, why don't landscape architects and other designers celebrate the nighttime more? How can we design for darkness? We often try to turn night into day, consuming huge amounts of energy, but why don't we dwell in the nighttime more and see more value in it? Many people here today probably remember sleeping on rooftops under the stars. Considering the implications of fossil fuels and changing climates, there may come a time before long where we have no choice than to inhabit the nighttime. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
Thank you.
I'd like to just say something about the experience I had with Gareth and with the anthropologist, Professor Stephen Caton at Harvard. We spent a year doing actually focus group studies in 3 cities in the Gulf. This really got us going into the studies that became the Qatar Foundation supported work for urban sustainable urbanism. But this business of walking, talking to people who live here, what they wish for, what they found as problems, is really very important. So our work is not only analytical in terms of looking at trends and stuff, but it's talking to people. What are those things that they wish, particularly what are those things they wish for their children in the future and their next generations? So now I'd like to go to the 5th of the breakthrough innovations on regenerative form and turn to Professor Sumyan. Would you please tell us about your thoughts?
Thank you, Nader. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's as has been already discussed by Nader and Jack, and then Spiro, and of course, recently with Gareth, that we have to focus on the human-centered perspective on the city. At the same time, we have to bring a balance with the nature. And something that at Liverpool we've been very concerned about, and we've been speculating on based on data, but at the same time trying to understand what impact they will have on the built fabric. So there are existing structures which it would be absolutely unnecessary to pull down. For example, that there are high-rise buildings that Jack talked about, which are reflecting light and creating difficult environments on streets. But if we were to start looking at it in a slightly different manner, in a more imaginative but research-centered manner, then maybe we can actually produce really wonderful architecture out of those. So for example, that if we can bring human and nature cohabitation, for example, to reintroduce nature into the habitat of our cities. So in rethinking the future, we can use our existing building assets. We should consider bringing back the biodiversity, which has sadly been banished from our built environments for in the recent past, and alongside taking technologically driven sustainable measures. So if we were to bring in the natural flora and the fauna, and we should be able to make that cohabit in structures like this, at the same time create solar panels, introduce solar panels and other measures, so that these inhabitations could become a much more integrated nature culture cohabitation. Next slide, please, Nader. Equally, we need to look into our production centers, our factories, our industries, and how biointelligent they are. Following a kind of detailed investigation into the kind of the relevance of different industrial infrastructure, but also their possibilities, their opportunities that they offer, we could actually turn these into biointelligent inhabitation, where sustainable retrofitting could actually provide a new future for our cities. So existing infrastructure could be adapted to new forms of clean energy production. So, and we can also allow infrastructure to integrate with human inhabitation, i.e. that work-live environments can actually also be close to infrastructure, therefore reducing the kind of distances that Jack was talking about within the cities. So that's something that we would be very keen to work on in retrofitting existing industrial infrastructure. Next slide, please. Another factor is that our lives are changing, as has already been indicated. We cannot go back to the past. Our lives are changing, our modes of living are changing. At the same time, we can make more intelligent decisions about how we live in order to make sure that those positive gains are never taken away from us. So one of the investigations that we were very keen on is to understand and build a model for how our future will look like in terms of a living environment and in terms of a working environment. And if we begin to pull these together, what might it do to environments that we already have? So for example, here, we were focusing on the idea of densification, because densification could actually bring all those kind of things about living, working environments in proximity to really useful effect. And so by densifying cities and urban fabric, we can cut down on the extensive infrastructure that we otherwise would need. Next slide, please. And finally, a take on our historic environments. Now, clearly, we want to maintain, restore, rebuild wherever possible our historic environments, and they have to be put to good use. They cannot any longer be seen as beautiful museum areas which lie dead, and it's only activated from time to time when visitors come in. Now, one of the ways in which we can do this is to think more imaginatively about the way that we introduce function or use into a historic environment. So whether we can, and probably the best way to introduce these would be that those that are relevant today to everyday people, as has been already discussed, that we need to look into the desire and aspirations of local population. And if there are the desires and aspirations that can fit in and can seamlessly slide into historic environments, then the historic environments will become relevant again, and they will not become just museumified objects. So we would like to actually reintroduce new function imaginatively, thinking about formal introductions which could begin to make important issues come forth in the historic environments. Thank you. Thank you, Nader.
Thank you very much, Sumyan. I think it's worth our emphasizing that one of the aspects about thinking about the future is that we don't have to go and build completely new. We don't have to tear down what we have, because over the last 30 years or so, an incredible amount of property has been built in the Gulf region. And unfortunately, since much of that property has been built based on unsustainable principles in terms of adaptation to climate, adaptation to people's way of lives, what has been presented by Sumyan is that we can go into the existing fabric of what has been built and develop new ways of using that product to become more adaptive, to become more nature related. And I think this is a very, very important domain for investigation about thinking of the future. So now I'd like to move to a very important group that is the third part of the urban collaborative, which is the idea presented to us by Urban Economy Forum and its relationships to the UN and UN Habitat. So to explain this and to also bring in how the UAE Pavilion can be an important place for Doha 250 case study to be placed, I turn to our friends Krishnan and Reza. Would you please take over?
Thank you, Nader, for your kind introduction. My name is Ananta Krishnan from Urban Economy Forum, as been mentioned earlier. As also Nader mentioned that, we have to make use of the existing structures to, address new problems. Like 76 years ago, UN was established to create peace, security, and prosperity globally. And subsequent to that, governments recognized the need for sustainable human settlements and the consequence of rapid urbanization, especially in the developing world. So the UN General Assembly then convened what was called as Habitat 1 conference in Vancouver in Canada in 1976. So the Vancouver commitments were reconfirmed 20 years later in Habitat 2 conference, as you can see in the diagram. That was in 1996. Then of course, world leaders adopted what is called as the Habitat Agenda. It's a kind of a real source book, a plan of action for adequate shelter for all, with the notion for sustainable human settlements, driving development in an urbanizing world. So then, of course, subsequent to that, then we had 20 years later, in 2016, Habitat 3 conference was organized in Quito, in Ecuador, in Latin America. And so it is also on housing, sustainable urban development issues, but creating a new set of, what shall I say, guidance, guidelines, and analysis. So it actually, Habitat 3 reinvigorated the global commitment to sustainable urbanization, and what was called as a new urban agenda was ratified, building on Habitat Agenda in Istanbul. So following Habitat Agenda, of course, then Urban Economy Forum was established in collaboration with UN Habitat and in Canada. Then the first, second, and third meetings of Urban Economy Forum were held in Canada in 2019, 20, and 21 to focus on issues that matter when it comes to urbanization and sustainable urban development, focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals, which are adopted, as mentioned earlier by Reza, on 17 goals, looking into the people's welfare and livelihoods, and especially Sustainable Development Goal 11 on urbanization. So the Urban Economy Forum established, then subsequent to that also, in collaboration with the Canadian government, what was called as the World Urban Pavilion was set up. And it was announced last year. And the World Urban Pavilion will be a knowledge hub, and it is supposed to promote front runners among cities in sustainability. So that's why.
Next slide, sorry.
Next slide, sorry. Next slide. So as I said, Urban Pavilion is, as I mentioned, collaboration between Government of Canada, United Nations, and the governments. So it's a global platform, It will act as a knowledge hub to share best practices, innovation and research in urban development, and revitalization from countries around the world. So there is actually much to learn from each other in terms of urban development. So the World Urban Pavilion will be an opportunity to showcase practices of various cities and towns globally, while learning from each other around the globe. That's a global platform. So there, of course, what's important is urban data. As we all know that high quality data, reliable data, comparable data, harmonized and sort of a consistent data are important to find out how SDGs can be indeed implemented and what has been done. So better data can improve policies and decision making by city authorities. So that's what one of the major role of World Urban Pavilion will be. So then it's not about numbers, data, and buildings and inanimate things. It is actually supported by people-oriented, innovative solutions towards realizing the SDGs. It's because it is all about people. So that's where I think the whole role of what shall I say, the World Urban Pavilion will be there. Next slide. As I said, it has been supported and commended, and really what is emphasized by the head of UN Habitat, Maimouna Ahmad Sharif, as well as Honorable Elizabeth Doudswell, who was also once head of UN Environment Program in Kenya, and not the least by Honorable Ahmed Hussein, the Minister of Families and Children. He said, the pavilion remains a Canadian gem in the eyes of our neighbors, and we can learn from each other in terms of urban development. So not the least, is based in Toronto. So Mayor John Troy said that he looks forward to seeing new ideas and solutions that will come out of this space, that is World Urban Pavilion, both is virtual and physical in Toronto, and that will occur with other leaders and countries around the world. So in short, Pavilion will be a global platform that advocates for sustainable urban development, for an interactive channel for the UN to create global network to realize sustainable development goals. That's where I think linking up with Doha, the Vision 2030 of Qatar actually dovetails well into the idea of World Urban Pavilion's work, and eventually being a front runner city that Doha can become in years to come. I will leave the word to Reza.
Thank you so much, Krishnan. Yeah, based on a long history about best practice and local leadership, UN Habitat have a role to exchange all the best practices around the world regarding urbanization. UN Habitat lead the conversation of urbanization globally on behalf of member states. I was part of this program for 2 decades. I see there are lots of fantastic best practices, but always we have a gap about sharing, about informing to the municipalities and to the cities in this regard. Pavilion established based on long-term collaboration, and it's kind of achievement of the collaboration with best practice and local leadership program and Global Urban Observatory. We believe we need to focus about urban data to provide kind of urban assessment. I talk about World Cities Report. In World Cities Report, we provide kind of perspective about what is the situation and circumstances of urbanization in the globe. And then based on all the interaction, we create this kind of intergovernmental hub. Go to the next slide, please. Regarding focusing about urban data and also providing a solid channel for bringing countries to collaborate regarding sustainable development goals. As I mentioned, UN Habitat lead Sustainable Development Goals number 11 as an urban agency. United Nations General Assembly endorsed UN Habitat, provide kind of urban assessment and kind of tools for as a kind of international index. UN Habitat creates City Prosperity Index under 72 categories and 6 chapters. And urban UN Habitat SDG cities program is achievement based on this kind of the first United Nations city urban assessment criteria. And based on that, we formed the Pavilion based on as a kind of collaboration between Government of Canada and UN Habitat. Go to the next slide. In this regard, we believe we need kind of a pioneer role for countries. Exchanging best practices is fantastic, but we need to have kind of pioneer role for cities and countries to create kind of sample best practices. And regarding the Doha 2050, I believe that this is completely matched with our goals and mandate about SDG cities, and it's possible to align with the urban future front runner of urban SDGs. We provide some breakdown for kind of long-term collaboration in this regard, and we hope for collaboration.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know who is speaking, but thank you very much, Reza, for that excellent, and Krishna for that presentation. Now, we'll be turning to part 3 of our work. We really have heard an amazing number of potential areas that these organizations that have come together to form the Urban Collaborative, Harvard, Liverpool, and the Urban Economic Forum. And I think that the response and comments by our regional experts, and we really do have a wonderful group of regional experts in various fields who I'd like to now call upon. The first is Mr. Isa Al-Mohannadi. He really, in a way, has been chairman and founder with the Qatar Green Building Council. Also, he was the one who commissioned the Harvard work on behalf of Musharraf in 2011. So I'm most interested that you would hear the comments of a person who has been living, directing, and thinking about Doha for many years. Isa, would you please take over? Isa, are you on? Is he connected?
Yes, he's connected, but I think he's away from his computer. So maybe you can move on to the next one. And
why don't we go to the next?
Oh, he's here. Okay.
Is he back?
Yeah, he's back. He's back.
Well, then we have to do something.
Sorry, I was away from my phone.
Just a moment. I have to get back to your slides.
Yes, please. Well, Nader, thank you so much for such a great session. It's enlightening to hear what the expert has to say today, especially the 6 innovations. I was so impressed by what I hear today. And I just want to emphasize a couple points that, you know, we in Qatar and Doha specifically used to have a sustainable urban design back in 40s and 50s. Our ancestors used to have a very sustainable socio-economical model for their urban design for their cities. So we had a number of things that was addressing the needs for the society and the human, which any master or any urban design should address. We had, you know, the Farij concept, which has every element that any society needs, such, you know, mosques for, you know, worshipping places, dukkans for social or for commercial activities, and so on. Even we had the Hawaii, and Hawaii means a doctor in Arabic, which also was, you know, medical facilities within facility. And Spiro has mentioned that, you know, we should design a city where people could walk and not needing to use the car. And that was also the concept. Although, you know, someone could argue that that time there wasn't any transportation means. But regardless, the city was designed for the needs of the people, addressing the social activities that make them enjoy living in their city. Can you go to the next slide, please? The other aspect that I want to mention today is the fact that Doha itself is a city which is designed using mixed concepts. So if you look at the heart of Doha itself, it has the administrative buildings, which is the Diwani Amir and the other building located in the center of Doha. But then you have everything else is away from the center of Doha. So the people living in what's so-called, I would call it a village concept, because everything is distance from where they live. And they always need a car to travel between place to place. I remember myself attending 3 different wedding events at the same time, which was, one of them was in the heart of the city near Doha, or near the center of Doha. The other one was in Rayyan, and the third one was in Al Wakra, I couldn't make the 3 events because, you know, of the time I need to be in the car. And that's something need to be addressed on how the city should be designed. Can you go to the next one? Next one, please. So I have put in images of different models that we have right now. Pearl, Qatar, and we have also the Lusail, and then we have the third one, which is the West Bay. And none of these are either you know, what's so-called satellite cities or you know, self-sufficient cities, but always have something and missing other parts. So it makes it, again, difficult for you to live in one of these and be sustainable or be satisfied to spend most of your day in the same location. You always have to be in the car, to have to travel between a place to a place to get your business done. And that's also need to be addressed as an issue that you know, with respect to any design of a city, that we need to also to understand that this city need to be designed to minimize the traffic, as Spyro said, and to minimize the use of the cars. Next, please. My last slide here, I'm showing an example of Musharraf, which I used to be the CEO for Musharraf 2007. I started this project. In this specific project, we tried to cater for the needs of the society and the needs of humans. So we, as you know, Qataris and the number of experts that we had to design the city of Musharraf, we made sure that this design addressed the social needs of the people living in Qatar. This development is designed with more than 100 buildings, LEED certified buildings, so environmentally is very responsible design, and designed with the local vernacular, which was adopted as a contemporary architecture language rooted in the past. So in this city, we also made sure that the needs of the design of the building cater for the human. So we have, for example, room for drivers in this development. So people, as really common here in the region, that they have a driver. Every family almost has its own driver. So we designed rooms for drivers to be and living with the family, so they didn't need to have them located far away from them. Finally, I want to say that any design, any urban design, really should be designed for the city and the people of the city they live in, and should not be franchised from another city from different parts of the world. It should be really designed in a way that address the needs of a human and the needs of the society that they live in. Again, I was happy to hear so many comments and remarks made by experts today, addressing most of what I mentioned in my slide. Thank you so much, Nader and everybody.
Thank you so much, Isa, for your presentation and also the history of your devotion to trying to build more relevant urban centers in Doha. I'd like to now move to Dr. Fadel Fadli. Fadel, will you please proceed with your presentation?
Thank you, Nader. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. And I would like to give my notes as a Doha-based architect, designer, educator, and researcher. I'm currently an associate professor of architecture and urban design at Qatar University Department of Architecture and Urban Planning. I first would like to say that this is a very unique and exciting experience. We have been involved over here in Qatar through the recent years, and making Doha as the regional hub for a mega international collaboration through this initiative, the Qatar and Doha Vision 2050. I would like to thank Nader, Spyro, Isa for initiating this years and years ago. And I would like also to thank ISOCARP World Congress organizers, all the contributors and participants very much for offering us this opportunity to involve virtually and potentially on site in the next coming days. Through this, you can see through the slide I am presenting, I have 3 slides. I want to be very concise, in the same time comprehensive. I looked at the 3 major dimensions of sustainability: sustainable urbanism, sustainable design architecture, and I clustered them: environmental, social, cultural, and economic. So what I thought, learning from the past, and you can see one of the photos on your left of one of the derelict historic villages up north in Qatar, through research we did with the students in our department a few years ago in digitizing lost heritage of Doha, of Qatar and Doha especially. And you can see how the human scale used to exist. While in the photo on the right is a picture I took a couple of years ago from Aspire Tower, the tallest building here in Qatar, at 303 meters. And you can see the urban sprawl over the Aspire zone and towards the remain of Doha and Qatar. So I think through the city of Doha evolution, its urban fabric, from the Farij, from the Barajas, from the unique buildings, we can learn a lot and educate new and future generations. Over this, we can learn also from the social cultural aspects and how the community used to live and how they used to prosper economically. Next slide, please, Nader. So over this, we can have some conclusive, not an endpoint thoughts, but which will take us to the future. So we have to be very smart, be diligent, thorough, and meticulous in our research, our explorative work, and contribute through the Doha Vision 2050, which is a unique vision involving integrative aspects from the past, how we could learn from our history, the architecture, the heritage, the tangible and the intangible, and the present aiming and prosper over the contemporary present, aiming towards a prosperous future. So as I said, we have to be very smart in the way we explore and analyze the existing data we collect on a daily basis. And in order to do so, we have to be careful and adopt a systematic approach in opening and unveiling Doha's hidden stories and untold secrets, which would hopefully enable the development of the Doha 2050 vision. Of course, all the experts here who have been presenting over the 6 breakthrough innovative approaches and strategies towards a sustainable urban development of a city, which is really considered as unique in its essence, but it is also integrative of several aspects from the past through what we live in the present and towards achieving a sustainable future, as one of the twisted towers a photo I took when I visited the Supreme Committee in West Bay. Nader, I think the slide went back. No. Next one, please. Yeah, this one. So it's fine. So over this, and in Qatar University, in our Department of Architecture Urban Planning, we have conducted a lot of research. We also explore through the design of our students. And I can tell you that all these 6 breakthrough innovations spanning from heritage protection, urban regeneration, to environmental well-being involving users' comforts and health, passing through the social cultural adaptation, bioclimatic intelligent design, smart architecture, cohabitation and involvement of ecological urbanism and architectural design, we can, and for sure, we will surely learn a tremendous knowledge from all those studies and projects done in the past. We live in the future, we live in the present to attain a sustainable future. So in Qatar University and through all our experiences with the students, faculty, staff, also linking with the industry, bridging academia to practice, to the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, we can devote a lot of time, a lot of efforts in connection with the Doha Vision 2050 to develop through real-life projects, such as the ones mentioned by our colleagues here, in an aspiration to be adopting a strategic development which goes in line of a smart, sustainable urban growth, urban design, but also at the architectural level, the building level, because it is a connection. We cannot build a sustainable city. We cannot plan a sustainable city We cannot design a sustainable city if we do not have the aspirations at the unit level, which is the house, which is the farij at an extended level. So I think through our academic endeavors, through research, teaching, learning, linking to architectural and urban design practice, through ties and links with the local, regional, and international practices existing here in Doha, we can also aim to develop smart, sustainable architecture and urban design in practice through design studios, through urban design studios. So I would like to conclude in very short but comprehensive integrative sentence. It is to state that we also look at living and prospering over our contemporary present, learning from our rich past without compromising our flourishing future. I would say we could wrap and focus all these 6 breaking through innovations to be user-centered approaches. Again, I would like to thank Nader and all my colleagues here, and we will be very happy to see the light for Doha Vision 2050. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fadel. I'd like now to move to another individual whom I have now known for more than 10 years, and that is our dear friend Ali Alraouf. Ali, please take over.
Thank you so much, Nader. This is Ali Alraouf. I'm an advisor for the Urban Planning Department here in Qatar, and I also teach at the Hamad bin Khalifa University. I've been living, teaching, researching in Qatar for the last 12 years. And I'm grateful for you, Nader, and the team for listening to our local voices, particularly our dear friends Isa and Fudayl and myself, because I am the kind of person that would believe in one size does not fit all. Each city has its own narrative, its own tale, its own story. But I'm also confident from what I've heard and what I know and what I participated in through the last decade, that this group, with the energy that we have, with the level of innovation and commitment and dedication, we can write a new chapter in the urbanity of Doha. And I'm so confident that we can do that. And therefore, speaking of the notion of the tale of the city, the narrative of the city, I want to focus here on what I called it, how to articulate a vision for Doha to meet its needs and aspiration for 2050. And I would stress the notion of the post. Doha is witnessing number of post-FIFA, because we were looking for a dream to host the event. And alhamdulillah, next year, we will have people coming from all over the world to see and to enjoy the matches in the city. But then what would happen after that? And then post-COVID, and we have learned multiple, and we're still learning multiple lessons, particularly from the level of architecture and urbanism regarding how to deal with this. And then finally, the notion of post-carbon. People are moving towards more green urbanity, more green way of life. Next, please. And I think in the thoughts that I want to share with you today, I want to stress that the key word is the notion of connectivity. Sometimes we only talk about it from an urban perspective, but I want to stress social connectivity in Doha, movement connectivity in Doha, urban connectivity in Doha, how to make a city that would speak to everyone. We have 85% of the population, people are coming from more than 130 nationalities. So how we can create a tapestry that would speak to all of them. Next, please. And hence, I want to share a number of critical issues that should be answered within Doha Vision 2050. And I would call it a sort of the local voice, how people living in the city, interacting with it, and at the same time, they have a lot of dreams and aspirations for it, would talk about. And I would say, number one, is the notion of the urban sprawl. With all what's done, still the city is moving in a very unprecedented manner in the horizontal direction. Not only that, but if you look closely at the fabric of the city, you will notice that we still have a lot of empty plots without specific function, without specific usage, and therefore this is still helping in the fragmentation of the urban fabric. Next, please. Another very interesting issue, and I've heard a lot of the respected speakers talking about connectivity, walkability, and this is actually there. It is in the master plan of Doha, Greater Doha, the notion of the urban centers and in a hierarchical format. But I think the challenge for Doha Vision 2050 would be how to make those urban centers vibrant, how to make those urban centers independent, well-connected, but yet independent. And therefore, all what you need to do is to walk within those urban centers to get whatever you need in terms of community facilities, schooling, work, residential, and so on. Next, please. And as I said before, the post-FIFA, we have incredible facilities, state-of-the-art facilities, not only the stadiums, but stadiums, green spaces, training facilities, all of these facilities that absorb incredible amount of resources, they should be re-articulated in a way that would enhance the legacy concept. One of the beautiful, beautiful assets about the organizing committee for the FIFA in Qatar is that they inserted the word legacy in their title. And I think the vision of Doha 2050 should dwell on that, should invest on the notion of legacy. Next, please. Doha and Qatar has more than 600 kilometers of waterfront. And we have to have this as a fundamental challenge while constructing the Doha Vision 2050. How to deal with such extended blessing from God, 600 kilometers of water. But at the same time, we have to be very careful because we know that Doha is vulnerable to the notion of climate change, sea level rise, how to do development adjacent to the water, that at the same time it's sustainable, and to be aware of the mitigation and adaptation policies that would secure the future without any dangers. Next, please. So I think as a finalization of my contribution, I am absolutely 100% positive with all the brains in the panel today that we can do something magnificent to Doha on the condition that we have the intention and the commitment to do a paradigm shift for Qatar. And this paradigm shift would be based on people. People are so important. People are important when we talk about architecture, urbanism, and planning. And then how to talk about community participation from a very creative point of view. Community participation that would allow us to listen to the local voices from different perspectives. And when I say local voices here, I'm not talking only about Qataris. I'm talking about people living and enjoying belonging to Qatar. And then the notion of just and resilient city, not only sustainable. And the idea of how to use the natural heritage as a platform for creativity rather than a medium to copy and paste. And then finally, waterfronts is not only for resorts, it's for development. It's for sustainable future of Qatar, and we should also dwell on that. Thank you so much. It was my honor being here.
Thank you so much, Ali. So some concluding remarks. In part one, you have seen the Urban Collaborative composed of Harvard Graduate School of Design and School of Public Health, and the work that we did on the past findings. Liverpool and their GAP project and their key findings. And Urban Economy Forum explained to you the wonderful potentials of the urban pavilion and how they bring the UN habitat to our work here, and the close linking of these three groups. I think, where else is there such a potential for an international group to bring its advice and opportunities to Qatar and the region? In part two, 6 breakthrough innovations: backcasting scenarios, circular infrastructure, ecological urbanism, urban wellness, regenerative form, and Doha Pioneer City. These are the proposed draft. We have a proposed draft to do stage A, Doha Vision 2050, in 1 year, and then to apply it over the next 2 years to the whole region. And part 3, we've had the beautiful benefit of the Doha community commenting, former sponsor, former President Qatar Green Buildings Council member, 2 university professors, and also an individual who is a QNMP urban planner. Who's missing from this link? I'm sure that I know those who I have talked with who are enthusiastic to be with us on this platform, and I look for our collaborative group to grow further. So let me look at where we are. I give you a picture of our Gulf region, and I read for you a poem. Were there no hope for the fruit, would the gardener have planted the tree? The first gardener image was of Mesopotamia, a tree of life, 7,000 years ago. And then even to the more recent 18th, 20th century, this image comes from the Islamic Museum in Doha, an image of the sarv and the birds and the lions and the fruits and the trees, part of our Islamic heritage of building fruits and trees and planting hope. And so here is then a young fruit, a young palm at birth in a way. Were there no hope for the fruit? Would these groups that have come together have planted this seed in your mind? Thank you very much. This is the close of our Sustainable Urbanism for the Gulf, the Foresight Challenge. Thank you for joining.